motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. As the member for Goldstein, I will never get those last 5 minutes back. Deputy Speaker, what are we talking about today? What we're talking about is what we are going to do as a parliament and as a government for this country to make electricity prices more affordable. And Deputy Speaker, in the words of the new Prime Minister, we are for Australians. We are on their side. And let us remind ourselves who is affected by the debate around energy. And it is, of course, the pensioners who go from payment to payment, fortnight to fortnight, making sure that they can afford to pay their contribution towards their energy bill. Often, and in many cases, including in the electorate of Goldstein, experiencing where they have to live in a single room during winter or summer because they can't afford the heating or cooling for the whole home. They understand the consequences of electricity prices. They understand in their lived human experience what it means when you have bad government policy, the legacy of our opponents that has driven up electricity prices year after year. We're talking about those businesses in the southeast corridor of Melbourne, across Dandenong, that, for instance, consume a large amount of electricity as part of their activity. The die-cast businesses that contribute components to our new defence industries, as well as car component manufacturers all across the world, that have to liquefy different types of metals as part of their die-casting process, or they have to use huge amounts of energy consumption in the products that they produce, who've experienced year-on-year increases in their wholesale electricity prices, and in some cases had to sign contracts of 200 or 300% over the future years. These are the people who experience the human consequences of high electricity prices. And it flows on to the number of people they can employ, the jobs they can create and the opportunity they can provide for the constituents within the southeast corridor of Melbourne and are replicated across the whole of this great nation. These are the people who experience the consequence of high electricity prices. And what we've had over many years, and it dates back particularly due to the era where the former Labor government dramatically increased the obligations on the renewable energy target, forcing high, expensive, unreliable energy into the market. And we have continued to live with the legacy and the commercial consequences ever since. And the focus of this government has been, how do we deal with the consequences and the legacy of bad Labor policy? And it's like dealing with the consequences after the long era of tariffs, of protectionism, where, of course, the market has become so distorted, so perverse, rewarding the wrong incentives and doing little to reward the best, lowest cost outcome for consumers. And the task for this government has been, how are we going to address this and fix this? And while we have been doing it and dealing with these real consequences for the Australian people, what have we seen the irresponsible opposition do in the meantime? They haven't said, we've learned from our errors and our mistakes and the punishment they have put onto pensioners because of their bad policy. They have not turned around and admitted their errors and accepted responsibility for the consequences of their policy. What they have done is said, no, we know better, we're going to double down. What we're going to do is turn around and say, no, the renewable energy target isn't big enough. Renewable obligations aren't big enough. We're going to keep forcing in electricity regardless of whether it's cost competitive or not, whether it's reliable or not, or whether it even necessarily cuts greenhouse gas emissions or not. They have put ideology ahead of the practical application for Australians. We have seen them make increasing commitments to cut their emissions without any proportionate understanding about how that's going to be done, and not just in the energy sector, but the impact it will have on agriculture, land use and land clearing policies, the impact it will have on transportable energy, or the impact it will have on future emissions in the industries where so many of the people that they claim to represent, they falsely claim to represent, work. And what this government has done at every point is said, we will seek to solve these problems for the nation and for the people of Australia. And what we face at a state level is obstruction, obfuscation from the Queensland and Victorian state Labor governments. And now's the time to put an end to it, and we're doing so.